Hey everyone, welcome back to Old World Legends. I'm your host Mike, and with me as always is Evan. We're going to continue quickly onto part 2 of our Wood Elves, diving in. Part 1 we covered characters, magic items, spells, and everything that read along with it. And part 2, Evan, what are we going to go over?
So now we're going over the rest of your army, the core units, special units, the rare units. Actually, you know what? We have to start with the force organization because we kind of skipped it. We just talked about what characters you could take, and now we're going to talk about what units are actually in the rest of the army and why we like to play these games.
I love it. Let's do it.
Okay, so the core is 25%. That's really normal, but interesting here, we do have 1+ unit of Glade Guard. That's very thematic. I think basically, every Wood Elf force is, kind of the main rank and file guys are the Glade Guard. They're kind of your introductory units. The rest of your core is the Eternal Guard, Dryads, and Glade Riders, and then some Deepwood Scouts. So Eternal Guard are kind of like these spearman guys. Dryads are the tree people who whack things and stand there. And then Glade Riders are your cavalry. They're actually kind of the best light cavalry in the game, maybe. I guess we'll see.
They're really good.
Yeah, and then being able to bring some Deepwood Scouts here. This is generally something that Wood Elf players take advantage of, is because Deepwood Scouts are just, I'm an archer, but I'm a skirmisher, and that just gives you a lot of other bonuses. They are more expensive, and you're already expensive, so maybe people should bring more Glade Guard. I don't know, but yeah.
But it is nice, right? You only are required to take one Glade Guard unit. That 1+ of a unit is pretty common in a lot of the lists. And it's nice that the Deepwood Scouts are up to 1 per 1,000 points. So, you typically playing a 2,000 point game, you can take 2 units of them if you want to. So pretty flexible core select.
Okay. Then we have Deepwood Scouts, Wildwood Rangers, War Dancers, Sisters of the Thorn, Wild Riders, and Warhawk Riders as special units that are kind of unlimited. Most of those are infantry there. The Sisters of the Thorn and the Wild Riders are cavalry, and then the Warhawk Riders are your kind of monstrous flying cavalry.
Very open-ended. Yeah.
And then the thing they limit is they're like, let's be careful, guys. Only 2 Treekin per 1,000 points. I don't know. Is anyone going to bring 4 units of Treekin?
Maybe not yet, but who knows what the Arcane Journals might bring us. So
I think people were spamming Treekin in 7th edition or something.
Well, there were definitely editions where they were super powerful, and again, they can be, but again, in this edition, right, we're not seeing them more of that tree list built. Some of the challenges we talked about last time, and we'll get more into when we get into the Treekin.
Yes, and then so we also have in rare. So we've got the Treemen. These are kind of the more fighty version. So we talked about the Treeman Ancient before. The Treeman Ancient forgot how to have some of his attacks and instead is a spellcaster. But the Treeman is like just a monster. He just fights people.
Yep.
We also have the Waywatchers, but you have to have a Way Stalker for each Waywatcher unit, so it doesn't quite fit into what people usually want to do, where they want to have little 5-man MSU archer builds. Then you don't really want to have 80 points of Waywatchers for every 85-point character you bring. But if you're going to bring a big unit of Waywatchers, that's exciting. I definitely want to do that.
But definitely puts you in that position where you can't go quite so MSU, so because you're doubling it by taking the character, and once you take the character, you want to put items on the character. So suddenly you're like, hey, I only want to spend 80 points on this unit. Suddenly you're spending, 250, 300 points in the unit, and now you definitely get that double down, triple down effect where, well, I just wanted to take it, and suddenly it's like, oh, this is 350 point unit because I took 10 of them, and then I took the character, then I buffed it up, and maybe that's not where you want to put your points.
Right. Then you also have Great Eagles. So 0 to 3 per 1,000 points. Who's going to need 7 great... Okay. But you can have a lot of Great Eagles.
You say that, but it just depends what you're trying to chase down in terms of, hey, one Great Eagle is certainly effective to chase down or to beat up an enemy, crew, War Machine crew, no problem. But if you start, there are other armies out there. We're starting to see more Skaven players and have more things to defend their war machines and such. But again, you take a unit of 3 Eagles, that can start threatening mid-tier, smaller MSU mid-tier units too. So 1 Eagle is not going to get the job done. They're pretty great for their stats. But again, in a rare slot, you're going to be, if it was special, I think you would see them a lot more often. Because it's in the rare slot, you're going to see them less.
Yeah, I also think that just you can't railroad people anymore with Eagles. So generally, you can kind of do what Eagles do with a lot of other units, especially like, let's say, Waywatchers who have feign flight, so they can just shoot at people and run away while chaffing them, and the Eagles don't do that.
Yeah, but
So
still, eagles are great for flying behind the enemy units if you're hoping to panic them and or get them to flee with them.
right,
So
that's
there's still
very
reasons to
true.
take that super fast flyer, especially if you're only spending a small amount of points on them.
Yeah, and if you have like a tooled up Glade Lord character who's going to go fight, one on one against another dragon, let's say you
Mm-hmm.
charge in an eagle too, so that once you win the combat and that dragon breaks and flees and runs away from you, you can have the eagle try to run it down while your dragon gets to stay and rally and turn to face something else.
That's right. Yep, there's definitely more utility piece for sure.
Okay, so let's scroll down until we get to the Wood Elf Archers, which is right after this page. Cool. So the Wood Elf Archers are essentially just a single page that talks about both the Glade Guard and the Deepwood Scouts. The stats are exactly the same, but the Deepwood Scouts have a couple extra special rules. So the regular Glade Guard, they've got Elven Reflexes, Move Through Cover, Open Order. So they're not a skirmishing unit, but they do have some options to buy some, cool, fun rules. The Deepwood Scouts, on the other hand, they have Evasive and Fire and Flee, which the Glade Guard have to pay a point for, and they have Scouts and Skirmish. So those are some really good rules, especially in combination with each other, because Evasive is just like, you can sit 24 inches away from somebody, and even if they want to fireball you, you can fall back and probably get out of range. Fire and Flee, if anyone ever charges you, you can at least shoot at them before you run away. Sometimes Fire and Flee is really, really useful to make yourself not flee as far. So if you want to flee only d6 inches and then get caught so that someone doesn't actually move that far, they just catch you and they don't overrun. It's a lot more useful than getting murdered and then overrun all the way into some other unit. And scouts.
They definitely put you in that situation where you can't play that hit and run game at max range, because typically you want to get your wizard just within range, right, to shoot things, right, with your spells and such, or even your archers, right. I have to get within 18. I have to get within 24. I'm going to get just within range. That's not going to work versus these guys. They're fire and flee or they're evasive. They're going to get out of range. So it's forcing, effectively, the mechanics or forcing the enemy army to get closer to you with their ranged and missile attacks than they want to be, because the closer they get to you, the more vulnerable they are to your melee or your counter charges. So that's the really fun juxtaposition that the Wood Elf army brings. It's not necessarily about always avoiding everything, but it's about forcing the enemy to bring them closer to hopefully your traps as you outmaneuver them.
So Glade Guard can be upgraded to have Fire and Flee. They can be upgraded to have Vanguard. Now, Vanguard's interesting because you do have movement 5, and sometimes that's almost as good as Scout without having to give up that +1 turn to go first to your roll. Because if you have pretty much any Scouts at all, you're probably not getting that +1, right? And then Glade Guard can bring a magic banner. And Deepwood Scouts can't do that. And some of these magic banners make your shootings better. So
and the banner up to 50 points. It's not a 25-point banner, so it's typically you're going to see banner selection at capped at 25, 50, or 100. Typically, just on the BSB, the 100. So the fact that they can take a 50-point banner is going to really open up the options on what they're allowed to take.
Yeah, I really, in my head, love the idea of 16 Glade Guard with a magic banner, and they're just like, we're gonna Vanguard, and then we're gonna fire Swift Shiver Shards at you with just machine gun bullets. Let's do it. Because they're 32-inch range, and if they Vanguard 5 inches, you're not hiding from this. You're going to get hit with something. I like that. But most people are like, nah, I'll just have Deepwood Scouts.
Yep.
I will say that the classic Deepwood Scouts is you have a bare bones unit of 5, then they start at 13 points, and then you bought Hagbane Tips. So that means 5 guys, they're 15 points each. So what is that? 65 points? No, more than that. 75 points for 5 toughness 3 wounds.
Yeah.
Ouch.
I think that's the main thing is you're going to get a lot of the damage output, but the defense just isn't there, right? So they very much are that glass cannon situation, and it just makes people uncomfortable. And I think that's one of the main things with the Wood Elf. They typically win hard or lose hard, and to play them well is typically it's a higher barrier of knowing the minutia and the rule and the movement mechanics and positioning, and so typically it's not often a great entry level army for people. It's typically a really excellent second or third army for most players as they're getting learning the rules of the game.
Or 9th army, in my case.
That's also a good option.
I actually have lost count of how many I have.
You got to collect them all, right?
Oh my god, that might happen. Okay.
Let's move on. Eternal Guard.
So I love these dudes because First of all, they've got all my favorite things. They're elves, so that's great.
Hmm.
Um, their weapon skill 5, like core
That's
unit,
really high.
which means like, oh, if you charge goblins into me, I'm hitting you on 2s.
Hmm. Yeah,
That's
web
adorable.
skill 5 is very uncommon for anything that's not a character.
They're only 4 more points than the elf spearmen, but they get to have the weapon skill 5 and leadership 9. Okay.
Hmm.
And Azrai's
Awesome.
spear is AP 1, so that's just better than
That's
every
great.
other spear in the game. Okay.
Hmm.
You take a shield, cool. And then the character can buy 50 points of items, so this guy can just be rocking a ruby ring. He's just like flinging that
Yep.
out there, whatever.
Hmm.
They could bring a magic banner, cool. Drilled and
Hmm.
veteran, also amazing. But you know what they have by default is stubborn. Great. I love that. The only
Hmm.
problem with this whole unit is like, okay, but they're toughness 3 and they're like a million points each, and they're not shooting bows, so most people are just like, I want to have bows that shoot people. But I'm like,
Hmm.
these guys are cool. And I don't think anything in the game is more fun to murder a bunch of goblins that charged you and you get to strike them first and hit them on 2s.
Yep. Um, but again, right now I think to your point, both the lack of models being available because they're not released yet, the fact that a lot of communities are still playing more kill points, the default rule set, then versus we're starting to see that shift towards objective scenarios. But that shift is, it changes, right? And every
Mm-hmm.
community is different depending on what your local community is playing. And we haven't seen the Arcane Journal, so I think there will be melee Wood Elf builds in the future. I think the Arcane Journal will bring more, and I think as we start, I think a portion of the communities will shift more towards those objective-based scenarios. You're going to see more infantry builds, more melee builds, and we will see Eternal Guard in the future.
Yeah, yeah. And I also think that this is a unit that's in particular very good against just a whole blob of toughness 3, strength 3, low armor dudes.
Mm-hmm.
Like state
Yep.
troops, men at arms. This guy is just like, I'm going to murder all of them.
Yep.
So, another favorite of mine, Wildwood Rangers. These guys are like they also have weapon skill 5. And they have high
Yep.
initiative and high leadership. But they also have a Ranger's Glaive, which is basically a great weapon that doesn't strike last, so it does have the strength plus 2 AP2. And then they have one of the coolest little automatic special rules in the game. If you're in base contact with something that causes fear or terror, you get an extra attack and multi wounds too.
Which is awesome.
And they cost like the same number of points as like a White Lion or a Swordmaster of Hoeth, but they just have this thing that automatically doubles their damage output if they touch half the units in the game.
Yeah, and to be fair, so many things cause fear and or terror. So fear
Every
more
undead in the
so.
game.
Oh, so many things cause fear. So this is one of those typically contextual rules I'm not a big fan of because they don't come into play often. This would be the exception to that rule because so much of the game has fear and or terror. This would be applicable in almost every game you will ever play.
So, Mike, off the top of your head, think of something that has multiple wounds that does not cause fear.
Multiple wounds that doesn't cause
Because almost everything that
fear.
has, like, every monster's infantry that has multiple wounds causes fear. So then this would trigger, right?
Well,
Every,
I know
every
there
almost
is
every
some.
monster's cavalry that has multiple wounds causes fear. You know, like a dragon ogre, for example, right?
Well, all the undead causes fear.
Yeah.
Vampire, Tomb Kings. Let's see, Chaos, something that has multiple wounds that doesn't cause fear. Yeah, because the knights are all one wounds. Chariot.
Yep. And
There we
so
go.
Pegasus Knights also. But this would be so cool versus a Pegasus Knight, but they don't cause fear. So, wah wah.
Yeah. But the
Um,
point is, to your point, almost anything with two wounds that's not a character will cause fear.
yeah. So I've been in my head imagining having like a unit of 5 of these guys where they just wait for someone to be running at your archers and they're like, cool, we get to charge now. And they run in there. They each get the 2 attacks at like a chaos spawn and they're just like,
Mhm.
we're having fun. And every single one that goes through is 2 wounds.
Yeah. Again, they're typically not going to be that big block that's running across the table, but as counter charge units, when the enemy gets closer in bricks of 5 to 10, I think absolutely have play.
Yeah, or you can stick your high magic mage in here and be like, let's really try not to die before we get to charge.
Hmm.
So that could
Yeah.
happen. I mean, other than that, they're just kind of like a medium to heavy infantry. They still only strength 5 total, so they're kind of more
Hmm.
on that swordmaster side, and they
Yeah.
don't have veteran. They do have an immune to psychology, so they can't flee or run away. So they're not good,
Yeah.
but they don't care about being fear or terrored off the table. So that's good.
They're really again more the more still that glass cannon, but more that mid range infantry.
Right.
And again, I think their place is not charging across the battlefield. They're not a heavy infantry. They're going to be that counter charge, that contextual piece where you want to lure the enemy into your traps, get there closer, and then hit them with this. After you soften them up a little bit with the bows first.
Yeah. War dancers. So we talked about the shadow dancer in part one.
Hmm.
War dancers are kind of insane. They have some really, really unique stuff. So every single guy has strikes first, even though they're already initiative 6.
Yep.
These guys are complete menace to any like weapon skill 3 or toughness 3 infantry. Like the first time I saw them on the table, I was playing my empire and I had some a detachment of state troops. These guys just hit my state troops, murdered all of them before they could swing back, even though they had toughness 3 with no armor. And I was just like, and then they just my state troops fell back, and then they pursued into them so they could fight again. Still striking first, still furious charge.
Hmm. Hmm.
Oh, and then they murdered that state troop detachment on the second round, and then overran into my cannon.
Yeah, I mean, again, if they can get into position and choose where to attack, they're incredibly powerful. Again, for against light or mid tier things, it's again, if the other enemy can get a ranged attacks off, a template attack off. And again, I know everyone makes fun of like breath weapons all the time. Oh, it's only strength 3. Well, versus elves, it's super effective. Right? There are
Yes.
definitely reasons where it's just I'd rather use the breath weapon at the versus right opponents, or again if they're still going to struggle. Of course, you can't chase into a big monster into something with that 2-up armor save, but they're great. For that, again, it's high. Wood Elf army is really high risk, high reward. That's the entire aspect of the army.
Yeah, and everything is kind of toughness 3 and 17 points a model. So, like,
With
so in most
very little
armies,
armor in general. Yeah.
like most armies, you wouldn't take these guys because then everything that shoots in the game or in the other person's army would just shoot these guys to death and ignore all your big blocks. Well, every single
Mhm.
infantry unit you have costs this much, so it's the same number of points regardless, right?
Yeah, again, it's just not an army that just wants to stand in a big battle line in front of the enemy and just get shot to pieces. It needs to, if there's ever an army in the game that needs to use terrain, this is the army that needs to use terrain to make it effective.
Right. So they can take a magic standard, and they can have banners, and they can be open order. That's cool. They can be skirmished, and they have a furious charge. They automatically like if they're charging you, their weapons go 6, and then they have the 2 attacks each, and another attack for additional hit weapons. So they're 3 attacks on the charge, right? Throwing spears, so that and a lot of people don't know what it is. It's a spear you can use for extra attack and extra rank when you charge somebody. So if you
Hmm.
get at the charge, you have some guys with additional hand weapon, and then all the spear guys go in the second rank. Those guys are all attack fighting too. Then you can pick the dance you want to do. Now remember I was saying one of the dances gives you AP2, so that character can join in, have the D3 extra attacks with no AP, but then you have whirling death, so now they're AP2.
Hmm.
But if you don't need that, if you're just fighting like Empire Halberdiers, then don't take AP2. Instead, take extra attack 1. So now you're on 4 attacks each.
Yeah, which is just great. Again, they just offer that toolkit of they have a lot of tools to deal with any light to mid range thing in the game for the almost entirely and to take it out, which is just awesome.
So you can have a dance that gives you a 4+ ward save. So that War Dancer character, just buy it like offensive items like the Dragon Slayer sword, and then just use the dance to give you a ward save.
Hmm. I mean, sometimes you just roll 4 ups, right? I mean, 50-50 chance, and then sometimes you fail on your first 2 rolls. So
Yeah.
it just depends on how your dice are treating you that day at that moment.
And if you feel really unlucky and you go like let's say charge some goblins, just take the -1 hit dance, and then you hit them on 2s, they hit you on 6s.
Hmm. Yep.
This unit is very unfun to fight against if all you have is melee infantry. Then you are gonna have a bad day.
Yeah, but that's also pretty rare to see that.
Right. Well, it depends on whether you're playing against me. Okay. So let's move on. So we got Waywatchers. So I've been talking about these guys. These are your little entourage for your Waystalker. They're your only Ballistical 5 regular unit. So if you have nothing but Glade Guard and the Deepwood Scouts, it's just Ballistical 4, and you're supposed to be the shooting army, right? It's kind of like when you play Tau. So these guys are your Ballistical 5. So if you are willing to pay the tax, you can have a Ballistical 5 infantry guys. They're only one more point over like what you generally see with the way with the deep wood scouts. But what do you get for that? These guys have base of Feign Flight, so that's the same. But they have Fire and Flee, so that's the same. But we do have, I'm sorry, Feign Flight's the unique one. That's the one. And you know what? This one is really, really, really good because a lot of people are impetuous or frenzy, and so they have to charge. And then you can just automatically run away and rally and still shoot them. I don't know. I think that's crazy good. And they just have built-in ignores cover. So just like Sisters of Avalon. If these guys take Arcane Bodkins and nothing else, they are just better than Sisters of Avalon, who are in every high elf list.
Yep. They're great. They're just pricey. 16 points a pop plus whatever upgrades you give them.
The problem is they're not 16 points each because you have to buy the 80-point character first. So some people see it as, no, these guys are 30 points each because I had to buy 80 points of tax. But if you bring a unit of 10 instead of 5, then that starts to be marginally less and less.
Yep.
They can have ambushers, vanguard, or veteran. I would probably take veteran out of those because, I mean, you can just be scouts or something. And then ambush, there's no way to make your ambush any better. And you want to be shooting, right? You have really long range, so let's start on the table and just start shooting.
I mean, it's hard to imagine a Wood Elf army that doesn't have at least one of these units in their list. But, you know, it's not a requirement, but they're just so good, you typically are at least going to want one.
And this is the kind of unit that people are like, they want to play the army because this exists. They want them to be there.
Yeah. Plus the models are cool. So hopefully they'll be released soon, hopefully.
So let's move on. So we got dryads. So dryads are your basically rank and file trees. So we still move 5. That's really cool. We're weapon skill 4. That's really, really useful because a lot of units like this might be like, yeah, they're not good at fighting. We'll weapon skill 3. No. They're still 4, which is great. Makes it harder for people to hit you. And then it's one of the only units in the book that gets to be tough to 4. So you're actually tough.
Which is great.
And they're 2 attacks base, which kind of it takes into account the fact that they kind of have like additional hand weapon kind of vibe. So that's generally why they have the 2 attacks.
Yeah, but they're really good. If you look at their profile again, plus they have a regeneration 6-up, and their skirmish, and their stubborn, and their magical attacks. I mean, it's their stat profile is they're very similar to actually ghouls in the vampire counts list, and both speed, points, and skirmish and everything. The difference is the ghouls get poison. Right, versus this unit doesn't have poison, has magical attacks, but it's still a very effective skirmisher unit. Again, it is meant for that lightweight. I wouldn't even necessarily put them up against medium things, but being skirmish and movement 5 and 2 attacks apiece, they're going to be able to. They're not going to go into the front ranks of things, but this is a great thing to hit the flank of another unit, right? To really just pour on weight of attacks.
This might be your most durable thing to throw in front of people, though. I mean, compared to everything else, this might be the most durable.
No, Treekin are more durable.
Yeah. I suppose, yes. So Treekin are, let's make them even more durable, so we jump up to strength 4, toughness 5. We have the 3 wounds, but then they're 50 points each. And they only have 1 more attack, right? Because they don't really get that, we have additional hand weapon thing. But the armor goes up, and so does the regen. So that's very, very useful. And they do have a stomp attack.
We can't see it all.
Oh, we can't see it all. Yes, we do have a stomp attack and a tree whack, and we're still stubborn. Stubborn's great because then you can just lose combat by however much you want in the first round, and usually you're probably dead by the second round anyway. So you just basically that means you're just not really going to run away, right?
And regen 5+ is great. I think the main thing. I think this is actually a very good unit, and it's one of the best units in the list that you want to absorb a charge with. I think that what we're seeing right now is a lot of the Wood Elf players. Again, this is a very high risk, high reward, high skill list, and you cannot take a 3-man unit or 4-man unit of Treekin and hope to survive. You really need to be taking a 6 to 8-man unit of Treekin to be able to absorb a charge and still have a lot of models standing. But as soon as you start taking 8 models at 51 points, that's an expensive unit to be the anvil of your army. And again, a lot of the players typically get the bloodlust. They want to charge across the battlefield to go engage with the enemy. And the reality is you need to whittle them down for 2 to 3 turns, ideally, before you are taking that charge and such. So, which is why I don't think they are priced a little high, certainly. And what happens is a lot of the Wood Elf players are just like, well, I could just spend that 300, 400 points on taking more bows and just trying to avoid my enemy entirely, right? And that works to a degree. But again, we haven't been seeing Wood Elf players have not been dominating, right, the event scene and such. So I think I'm encouraging them out there, Wood Elf players, to mix it up, and hopefully will again the Arcade Journal should bring a lot of fun, exciting new builds and themes and strategies to the table as well. But that whole just I'm going to avoid you all the time and rely on my dragon and ranged attacks. Can be effective, but it's
Right.
typically not going to get you to the top podium spot. You're going to need to start. I encourage you to think outside the box and think about more builds and finding other ways to get a little more melee into your list.
It's also really a meta response. So, Mike, if our archers are 13 points each, we have a Glade Guard with, any kind of arrow. He's 13 points.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah.
can't buy enough of those to be able to gun down bricks of 30 zombies, 40 clan rats. Like if people are
Depending
pushing,
on what you're facing on the other
yes, if
side.
people are pushing lots of wounds of guys at you, shooting does not work. It's almost worthless. And you can have that Hail of Doom arrow that I was talking about that's really fun. You have the big explosion, but the regular arrow shots, you do not have enough of them. So
Mm-hmm.
if we see the meta shift towards people actually bringing bricks of infantry at you, that's where we need the Wood Elf players to then bring the melee units to fight them. Because I think Dryads, high initiative, 2 attacks each, and stubborn, I think they can just sit there whacking people, grinding through bricks of 20, clan rats or 30 zombies all day. So can Treekin, right? Whereas if you have units of 5 Glade Guard, 5 Deepwood Scouts, they fire 5 arrows, they get 1 poison through, and then 1 other wound, they take off 2 zombies. What is that going to
Yep.
do?
And again, it's just always changing as the meta is shifting, right?
Yeah.
As people are focusing more in this 3 to 6 month period on dragons, or more on the scream lists in the next period, or now it's the Pegasus Knights, right? And that's the fun thing about the game, and it's always evolving,
Yeah.
and the community is always going to be bringing the next new hot thing, who can topple
Yeah.
the latest big bad.
And poison MSU arrows only kind of works versus a dragon or a monster spam list because they still run at you pretty fast and you don't have as many arrows as like Tomb Kings or Goblin spam, right? Whereas
Mm-hmm.
melee units can actually fight this specific target. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
I do. I truly believe that the where Wood Elf armies are shine is that mixed arms list,
Yeah.
where it's not just one skew thing, just the pure skew of I'm just shooting an evasion and nothing else. Again, if they lose 1 or 2 pieces of the list, it falls apart, right? Versus, I think it has far more flexibility to deal with different lists with that mixed arms approach. But again, very high rating and not easy to do.
So just like almost everything else in the Glade or in the kind of Wood Elves book, kind of the basic guy is I have a bow. That's kind of their basic thing. So the Glade Riders, their basic cavalry is a bunch of horse archers. Now, I think these guys are some of the coolest horse archers in the game because unlike a lot of the other elf-like cavalry, they actually have some of the rules you would expect. We've got fire and flee. We've got reserve move. That's kind of the big one, I think. Non-evasive, which is a challenge, but I think reserve move is almost better because if you put your wizard on a horse and you join the Glade Rider unit with reserve move, you can pop out of the woods, shoot at someone, and then pop behind the woods. Now they can't see you. So they can't cast at you, they can't shoot at you.
Assuming you have woods there, but yes,
Yeah,
evasive
or
is more of that
impassable terrain.
defensive. It's defense reactionary versus reserve moves is defensive proactiveness. So if I had to pick, I much personally prefer the reserve move because it gives you that proactive ability. It's because you're making the position versus the other one is you're reliant upon you're giving the other person more control.
Yes. So we have our nice high movement. We don't have any armor at all, but my Illyrian Reavers have 6-up armor saves, and I've passed like one of them in the past like 4 games. So, armor's not always like actually going to do anything. We can take banners. We can take the magic arrows. Often you see True Flight, so that you can move around and still get to fire without any penalties. But I mean, Hagbane is just as common because, I think one of the problems with kind of the core rules and with the Wood Elf rules is that poison is the best rules. But poison is the best on units that are low ballista skill because it's just as good if you're a goblin as if you're an elf. And this whole book is full of ballista skill 4 and 5. So why are we spending all these points buying poison when you're just going to be hitting on a 6 anyway to get to use it, right?
Yep.
But then what does that say if that's still better than all the other arrows?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can have ambush. I don't think anyone does that. You can have drilled, which if you're going to be a skirmisher, you don't need. But I mean, drilled is really cool, especially if you want to get to zoom around the battlefield really fast. I mean, I think that it's a lot of points to buy it, but if you want to have a unit of like 8 of these guys in drill, in marching columns, they can just zoom up the table. They're going to go fast. And they can have magic banners. I don't know exactly which one they would need, but one of them is ignore cover, which is a good rule, so maybe that's the one you put on them.
Yeah. And I think you don't see ambush because, again, the army's so fast, they're able to get around so much, right? The ambush is really for melee units that want to get close, right? And that's typically not what this army is doing, or certainly not these units.
I will say that there is a way to play ambush where you put a whole bunch of units of ambush, literally just so that you have fewer points on the board that the person can kill. If I have my dragon and my wizard and all of my other guys are just not here, you're not going to get to kill them, so no victory points for you.
I mean, that's a strategy. That's a risky one.
Well, the problem is that really works great if your guys don't have 32-inch range bows. That can be really useful all game, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so Sisters of the Thorn used to be one of, if not, the best unit in the game. Why? Yeah. Well, if you read all the rules on the page, arguably, well, maybe the most annoying.
Yeah. I think, but yeah, effectively, right? It's they're fast. They have a lot of shenanigans, but what it came down to was their spell capabilities, right? Because the first release, what you're seeing here, the version of the rules is allows them automatically, right? They're going to have the spells, and it would allow them battle magic, and you got to pick your spell. And so, effectively, what all the players are doing is, wait a second, I can take a unit that has still a plus 2 to power level 2 to cast by themselves, and they can take Pillar of Fire or Fireball. Hell yeah, I'm going to take as many of those in my list as I possibly can. To be fair, very effective, super effective. But of course, the GW in one of the more recent FAQ updates, they did take that away, so it is randomizing the spell that you're going to get, and as soon as it no longer you have control over that, because again, it's when you could spam that one particular Fireball or Pillar Fire spell that the unit was quite frankly overpowered for its point cost. And a lot of players were just building their list entirely for spamming this unit. And gotta be honest, wasn't super fun to play against. So I'm not sad to see it go, but perhaps they swung a little bit too hard in how much they nerfed them. I think it would have been more effective if perhaps they limited the number of units, or they could choose the spell, but maybe they just couldn't spam Pillar of Fire. There are many ways in which they could have approached doing it. That being said, once they nerfed that, you saw a lot of Wood Elf players just switch to a different army. And so, I think when the models come out, the Arcane Journal comes out, you're going to see a lot more excitement for the Wood Elves again, and I think we're going to see a lot of those Wood Elf players who have moved over to their second or third favorite army, they're going to come back to Wood Elves, and we're going to see a lot more creativity. So it's both been the blessing and the bane of the Wood Elf players thus far in the old world, this unit.
I'll just say, though, that if you just look at what the stats are and you just ignore Deepwood Coven, you just say, what's that? I don't even know what that is. We've got a fast cavalry unit that still has weapon skill 4, so that's good. Ballistic skill 5 base. Okay. Leadership 9, amazing. They're only 24 points, and as you'll see very quickly, they have a ward save of 4+.
That's great.
So my Phoenix Guard don't have that anymore, but my Phoenix Guard costs 16 or 17 points each still, and they're infantry, and they're only 6-up ward versus non-magic. These guys are just not 4-up ward versus everything.
Yep, and they still have Fire and Flee, Move Through Cover, Poisoned Attacks, Swift Stride, Fast Cavalry, all out of the gate. They're an exceptionally good unit, even if they didn't have that.
If you just ignore this rule entirely, these guys are a freaking steal.
Point for point, they're fantastic.
24 points, Leadership 9. They still have Fire and Flee. They're not immune to psychology or anything, so they can't actually run away. They have poison attacks base, so even in close combat they have poison, and it's on their horses and the rider. They all have poison. They have poison on their 12-inch range AP1 Javelin, which is amazing. They can march and still shoot it. So they can go 16 inches, do a free open order pivot, and then throw javelins at you. I
So
mean,
we're going to see them again, and the models for them are awesome. So they'll come back, just in a different form, and such. So yeah, I think just some hearts were broken with the taking away the spamming of the list, but I think that's healthier for the game, and it's going to lead to more interesting builds in the future.
might I just point out that my Centaur are Strength 4, Toughness 4 with a Ballistic Skill 3 and a Throwing Axe, and they're 22 points each.
Hmm.
And they don't have a ward save. They don't have armor either.
Yeah. Anyway, moving on.
So I think that maybe people overreacted a bit to the nerf. The nerf because it was
To be fair,
way too
it's
good.
not about overreacting. It's hey, it's an army you love. It's a unit you love, and getting nerfed, it sucks,
Yeah.
right? It happened to all of us. Meta shifts, and it stinks when it happens, and that's okay. The meta will come back at some point. So I get it. And guess what? There's so many other awesome armies out there to play as well. It's great that we're getting to see more variety out there rather than just one thing. So, but don't worry, the Wood Elf players, still plenty of them, and I think there's going to be more to come once the models come out.
So Wild Riders, another unit that just seems way better than my high elf version of the Dragon Princes. So these guys are a bit crazy because we're riding a steed of Kurnos, which is basically a stag. We're up skill 5. We get to be strength 4 base. That's
Hmm.
I don't know if any other Wood Elf character or unit gets to be strength 4 base. So these guys go to the gym. That's what I like to call it. They have Furious Charge and Frenzy. So when they
Hmm.
charge you, they have 3 attacks each. So they're
Ooh.
basically Demigryph Knights that are on a 30 mil wide base.
Hmm.
And then they're Strength 5 AP1 with their Hunting Spears. Oh,
Yep.
I'm sorry, no, Hunting Spears AP2. So yeah, they're Strength 5 AP2 but they can only use it
They're
when they
good.
charge. So if they don't
Yep.
charge you, it's bad.
Hmm. Yep. So they're very very good, and again um, I believe they do have enough hit with strength 5, with AP2 and armor bane, and enough attacks they can punch through those more heavily armored units. Not necessarily T6 T7 monsters and things, but certainly heavy cavalry, chariots, heavy infantry. They're able to pack a punch, and they are pricey, right? At 27 point base, then you start
They're not
upgrading them.
pricey. This is not
But
pricey.
they hit hard.
Mike, Dragon Princes cost 37 points each.
That's true.
And the
That,
Dragon
but the
Princes are
dragon
impetuous, which is almost as bad as Frenzy because you still
they
charge
have
when you
more
don't
armor
want
though,
to.
don't they? What? How much armor do dragon princes have?
Not enough.
Not fair enough. But anyway, so I think the main thing is this unit, for melee unit, hits very very hard, and is fairly reliable. Frenzy is of course its one downside in terms of its enemy will the other opponent will try and use frenzy against you, but when they hit, they're gonna hit hard.
And they do have the tattoos for a ward save.
Hmm.
And I think that it's a unit that it really speaks to the unit that if it's good enough to be worth playing keep away with the frenzy, trying to prevent your own unit from charging.
Hmm.
You can do this very easily by putting a single Great Eagle right in front of them. So if the Great Eagle charges 2, then you're good. Everyone charges. If the Great Eagle doesn't charge, then the Wild Riders can't charge.
Well, back to another reason to take those great eagles.
Yeah.
Cool, I love it. Let's move on.
And they can have a banner too. We're going to talk about the banners, but I think a lot of the banners are shooting focused. So, I mean, other than a war banner, maybe I don't
Well,
know if there's a great option.
again, there are banners from the core rulebook that they could take as well. Again, you could
Yeah.
even consider like the Razor standard, right? You roll those 6s, all of a sudden it's -4.
They
Holy
already have
crap!
armor bane. No, it would be -5, Mike. They have armor bane 1 base.
Oh my goodness, right? So, right, it's like, whew, so
I
much
think that
armor.
I would take the rampaging banner for reroll to my charge. That's what I would do because you want to charge. If you don't make it, you're screwed. So definitely make the charge.
Yeah, that's fair. There's so many good combos out there.
Yeah. So Warhawk Riders, I think these guys are really really neat as well. Now the reason why nobody takes them is because they're 44 points each. Monsters Cavalry that flies, which is great. They have the 2 wounds. How many points are Pegasus Knights again?
Yeah, but you can't compare every army to the Pegasus.
That's true. I mean, again, it does make you sad. But what's cool with these guys is they do have a bow, but if you charge, the Warhawk still has 2 attacks, and you have a rider that gets to fight. These guys can scrimmage with people. They're not a Pegasus Knight, so they don't have like a million attacks each. They're strength 6, but they don't need to be because they can still outfight units of chaff, units of fast cav. If the other person has like Illyrian Reavers, charge these dudes into the Illyrian Reavers. They're watch them all die. Or guess what? These are the best coolest unit in the game, I think, to force frenzied units to have to charge. Because you can just feign flight with your swift stride, and you're flying away, fire and flee at them with a couple arrow shots. It's amazing. I mean, obviously, 44 points per bow shot is a lot, but you're not bringing them just to shoot. You're bringing them to fight melee and shoot and move around.
And I think that's the main thing people need to realize. The bow shots are bonus. It's not the core, right? The most powerful thing is, again, flying behind the enemy, flying into chasing down the chaff or utility units of the enemy, getting into somebody's flank, right? They're the ultimate utility piece. Certainly, it's one of the best utility things in the game. They are, not cheap, starting at 44 points, but they bring a ton of flexibility to the list. Chase down war machines, things of that sort. So, and it's great because they can do all of these things.
Right. I think that you just stick them with the true flight arrows, and you just you send them out there to do some shooting, but mostly these are a mobility piece. I think this is way more fun than having the Great Eagle, because you send these 3 guys out there. You force people to charge them. If anyone shoots them, you can use evasive. If anyone charges them, you use feign flight. And then you see a little unit that with the enemy wizard that's exposed, and you charge these guys into it. If these guys could probably fight a unit of what is it called, the Marauder Cavalry.
Oh sure, absolutely.
Yeah,
great unit.
So I think it's just when a unit isn't just best in slot at one specific job, people just ignore it. But it's this can do lots of different things. I like that. I value that a lot.
Yep.
And they're cool.
Oh, the models are so cool.
They're very cool. Okay. Yeah. And then we see this is the dragon from earlier, obviously. The other monster option. So we're going to see all the other monsters here. So we have the eagle. So we've been talking about this for a while. So an eagle is a monster. Its weapon skill 5, so it's pretty high. Strength stuff is 4, 3 wounds, 3 attacks. So it's a kind of a very, very light monster. Almost to the point of being
for sure.
Like a single Demigryph Knight or a single Dragon Ogre almost. But you don't really have the armor, but you do have the mobility. And the main thing you use these guys for is to basically fly around and be annoying. So people take 2 or 3 individual Great Eagles instead of a unit of Warhawk Riders. And I think that both do a similar job, but the Warhawk Riders are cooler.
Yeah, and again, and you don't have to mix match. You could potentially take both, but they do feel very similar / utility pieces. I think the biggest difference is are the Warhawk Riders, are they skirmishing?
Yes.
Are they going to get the 360 sight? Were they on? So right versus this is a monstrous creature, so it's not going to be quite as agile as the Warhawk Riders. So pros and cons to both, but it is tougher, right?
Yeah. So this is like the gyro bomber, and the Warhawk Riders are like the gyrocopter.
Right. But it is a light monster, right? If you imagine the dragon is the heavy slot, things like the Manicore and such, or Chimera like the medium slot. This is definitely in that light slot on the monster side of thing.
Yes.
Cool.
Honestly, he doesn't really outfight anything in the game other than War Machine crews. So, especially because you only have a couple attacks, you can just charge in and then just miss. So that's where I'm kind of I'd rather have my Warhawk Riders.
Yeah, I like the Warhawk Riders. Both good.
So the Treeman. So this is a behemoth. Really, the base is only 50 by 75. That's interesting. So he gets to have more attacks than the Treeman Ancient, and he doesn't have to pay points for being a wizard. But he's kind of just he's still got the regen. He's still flammable. If you want to bring essentially the equivalent of a giant, but Wood Elves, this is kind of what that is.
That's exactly what it is. It is more reliable than a giant too, though, because it's not the giant table where it randomly is going to do things. So it is very reliable, and it is great. Again, its downside is that it's movement 5, right, and it doesn't have things to make it go faster, but it hits very hard. It stomps. It is a behemoth, but it's a behemoth with only D3 stomps rather than D6, right? But again, it's a good unit. I think most Wood Elf players right now are trying to, besides the dragon, avoid melee entirely, which is why we're not seeing this on the field of battle very often right now. But I think we're going to see more of this in the future.
Yeah, and also this is another one of those units, I'm going to bring it up a lot, where it's a monster that I don't understand that when it's not a dragon, the price points of the monsters doesn't quite make sense to me. Because this guy, he only has the 5 wounds and 5 attacks and only D3 stomps. But he's just as expensive as a giant, which is 6 wounds, 6 attacks, or well, it's a random number of attacks, but definitely D6 stomps, right?
It's random.
And like,
Yeah.
I don't get that. Like, it kind
This
of
guy
feels
gets
like,
regeneration. Giant doesn't get a 5+
well, the
regeneration.
chaos one does, but yeah,
Yeah, the cat.
right. But
You have to pay
we
points
can
for.
also
No,
all
you
just
have to pay
agree,
points for a 6+ regeneration. I think with the
right?
chaos one. I think you give them the 5+ armor save if you pay the points for that. So it's not quite. It's not quite the same. It also has tree whack as well. The giant doesn't have that. It has armor bane out of the gate. Giant has none of that. So again, we could certainly pros and cons of the points cost value, this and that, but it is fairly equivalent and more reliable than a chaos giant.
It's a little bit more tanky, it definitely, because weapon skill, for example, very very high.
Yeah, chaos giant's nowhere near.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say we can all agree though that the gigantic chaos spawn, they just mistyped the number of points it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be like 220, not 130 or whatever it was supposed to be. Like it's 100 points lower than every other monster that's like it. It's weird.
Yep. Anyway, moving on.
That was it.
Cool. So should we go through the banners at least?
Yes, the magic banners. So we've got 4 here. Banner of the Wildwood gains fear. If you already have fear, you gain terror.
Yeah, terror's good, but again, when there's undead out there and demons and other things that are just the whole army's immune to psychology, it's contextual and not one that I would be willing to spend 40 points on.
And fear, I think fear is pretty cool, but it's a lot of points, and fear only matters if you outnumber the person, and you're elves. So when's that going to happen? Right?
You don't need to outnumber them for the -1 to hit in combat. They just have to fail the fear test.
But they don't have to take a fear test unless we outnumber them.
Let's move on. I'll look it up.
That's why fear just never does anything. Okay, so Banner of the Hunter King. This one gains Vanguard, but it's 25 points, and a lot of the units can just buy Vanguard for a couple points each. So I don't know who would need this at all. I mean, maybe the best, because for example, a Vanguard banner.
Characters can't.
Yeah, a Vanguard banner is really, really strong in Bretonnia Exiles because you want to just charge people. The best play I could think of is you put this on your Warhawk Rider unit to make them fly 10 inches forward before anyone gets started. It's interesting. But yeah, I don't know who else needs this really. And like I said, one of the things that happens with Wood Elves, right, is that they don't necessarily bring a lot of big units. They bring a lot of small units, so then why buy a banner for 5 guys, right? That's what tends to happen.
Okay, yeah. So the fear is not the double to take the test. You just have to have a higher unit strength. But again, to your point with Wood Elves, it's rare for them to have the higher unit strength. So yeah, very, very true.
Okay, so Banner of the Eternal Queen is a war banner that only works if you're near a wood.
Again, contextual. You can bring woods. You can bring this tree singing spell, but yeah.
I mean, the only reason you take this is if you already bought the war banner and you're buying another thing.
Mm-hmm.
Weird.
Yeah,
and then we have. Then I think we have a really, really, really good one. So we have 15 points. They gain ignores cover. So if you already have arcane bodkins, you already have magical arrows. So like, here's in my head what I'm doing. I'm taking the banner, like of Midsummer's Eve, on a BSB who is joined to, and then he takes the Forest Sprite for Resplendent Luminescence to give them magical attacks, and then he puts himself in a unit of vanguarding Glade Guard, who then have like, I don't know, multi-shots too, like the Swift Shiver.
Yep.
And so they're just like spitting out a million poison arrows, or basically, no, not poison arrows, but basically just magical attack arrows, and with ignores cover.
Yep.
Pretty early on. I like that.
Pretty cool.
And those upgrades are pretty cheap. You just have to actually want to buy a unit of Glade Guard that's more than 5 guys.
Yep. And keep in mind, there's also the normal standards you can take as well. The classic War Banner, Razor Standard, and other such. So are also good combos as well. Certainly.
Yes, Razor Banner, yes. And just also, so we are going to see with the Arcane Journal, they very often give you like 4 more banners. So pay attention to that. Maybe the build will come because the Arcane Journal will give us 4 banners and one of them gives the unit Furious Charge or something. I don't know.
Who knows?
And you're like, why not take that, right?
Awesome. Well, we did it. We got to the end of the video. Again, if you made it through video 1 and video 2, please do like, share, subscribe. Help us get out there. And we're excited to talk about the next armies going forward and the Arcane Journal when that comes out. Evan, any last words?
No.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll catch you next time.